So, welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you, dear sisters and lay people, to this virtual house of Maria Rosa Molas. Yes, this is Maria Rosa's house because we are all members of the Consolation Family, men and women who follow Jesus of Nazareth in the style and manner of this woman. This woman who consoled by sustaining the hope of the poor, like Jesus. She defended the lives of the most disadvantaged and their rights, just like Jesus. This woman who healed wounds of the body and the soul, just like Jesus did. She consoled by fighting for justice and building peace, just like Jesus. She promoted the dignity of women, just like Jesus did. She consoled from reconciled relationships, making daily in the world the relational way of God, just like Jesus. She took care of the sick, the elderly, children. She took care of the sisters in a very devoted and delicate way, just like Jesus did. And just like Jesus, Maria Rosa Molas was merciful. She was humble, tender, compassionate, simple, and very charitable and kind. Maria Rosa Molas had taken the human way of Jesus. She entered into the new ethical order of the civilization of love. And she comes to us, all of us, as a living gospel, as a teacher in humanity. With the light that the life of Maria Rosa Molas is providing to us, we, as members of the Consolation family, we are journeying to strengthen the social dimension of the charism in our personal, family, community, and work life. And in trying to awaken and educate our sensibility and conscience to the new paradigm of the social, humanity and earth are inseparable. Paths to live and develop the ethics of care, a way to promote the common good, a path to live reconciled relationships, a way to commit ourselves to the cry of the poor and of the earth. Console, console my land. Our God says, console, console my poor. Our God says, console, console my people. Good afternoon, good day, good night, and good evening, and I wish you all a good webinar. We are facing a serious ecological crisis. The scientific data are quite clear. Technology has progressed enormously, but we are destroying our common home. We have raised walls, social barriers. We have separated ourselves from Earth, and we have tried to dominate it in a despotic way, thinking that we could be self-sufficient. Transhuman super people, putting about epidemics and even death. There are many people who say this. And when we least expected it, we have received a new warning. This very small virus, it was not even a living thing, has brought us back to think that everything is connected. I will try to go to the roots of the delicate situations that we are living, because we cannot live today the integral ecology if we do not change the mental ecology, if our mentality doesn't change. Like in all great crises of history, we need to review the philosophical and anthropological basis that have led us to this situation. What has gone wrong? How can we change our relationship with nature so that it is possible to overcome this crisis? A look at the past can help us to understand the present in which we find ourselves. The Black Plague that extended in Europe starting from 1348 killed 1/3 of the European population, and it forced to review the medieval conception of human beings and reality. 7 years ahead, in 1341, there have been in Florence a credit bubble that led to a deep economic and financial crisis that only could be overcome after 30 years. That crisis had a lot of similarities to the one that we have lived here starting from the year 2007. Back then, critical moments, the Franciscans went back to propose the economic aspects that they have been developing in the previous years, starting with Bolivia and many others. That crisis of 1341 was an opportunity that the Franciscan has taken to provide a great service to society. They contributed to the emergence of modern economy and to strengthen community ties. I explain in my book, Economic Crisis, a Franciscan Proposal. In the 20th century, after the two world wars, authors such as Martin Buber and Emmanuel Levinas wondered what went wrong in Western philosophy as to have the Holocaust. The countless technological advances of the Belle Epoque, photography, movies, the radio, supported the apparent supremacy of Western civilization, justifying this way Darwinism. However, it was there where the greatest barbarism has occurred. Levinas attributes this collapse to the tremendous mistake of Western philosophy that had put the thinking eye, as dominating at the center of reality, subordinating everything else to it. We should put at the center the other, he said, the one who with his naked face awakens in me the ethical dimension. The other, our neighbor, must be thought of from oneself and not as in the function of the thinking subject. Even today, we have to ask ourselves, what should we change in our anthropological conception so that we are able to have a basis of an integral ecology? My presentation can be summarized in 2 sentences taken from the encyclical Laudato Si. There can be no ecology without an adequate anthropology. And the second sentence is the need to overcome unhealthy dualism that left a mark on certain Christian thinkers. In the first part of my presentation, I will analyze the dualistic anthropology and the concept of human beings. Then I will try to identify the anthropological basis of integral ecology and the way to establishing a new relationship with creation. Integral ecology is the central theme of encyclical Laudato Si, which, from its very title, presents St. Francis of Assisi as a source of inspiration and an example par excellence of an integral ecology. He quotes him 11 times, and his Canticle of Creatures reproduce almost entirely in number 87 of Laudato Si is the key to reading the entire encyclical. We're going to quote the encyclical Laudato Si using just the numbers among parentheses. In Francis, what is inseparable, the concern for nature, justice with the poor, and the commitment with society and inner peace. He is a model of integral ecology. He loves and cares for creation. He teaches us a deep respect for our environment, and he invites us to take care of it. In 1979, John Paul II proclaimed him patron of those who cultivate ecology, Ecologicae Cultorum, praising his contemplative glance, specific of those who don't want to possess the reality, but taking it as a gift, discovering in everything the reflection of the Creator, and in each person his living image. In my presentation, I will try to highlight that in order to achieve integral ecology, we need to overcome the ontological and ontic dualism that have predominated until now in Western philosophy, and that have led to the technocratic paradigm, to the throwaway culture, and a permanent dynamic of conflict. The thesis of human exception is based on these dualisms to highlight the separation between man and other creatures, giving rise to a despotic and irresponsible anthropocentrism or biocentrism. Anthropocentrism is based on the ontological and ontic dualism, to which I have just referred to. On this basis, modernity has favored an absolute and self-sufficient anthropocentrism, which defends the complete and absolute dominion of man over nature and over his own body. The non-human world has only an instrumental value depending on our needs. Progress consists in dominating it and humanizing it. For example, Francis Bacon claims that science and technology have the objective of expanding the limits of the human empire and to subdue the forces of nature. René Descartes confirms that we must become masters and lords of nature, broadening always more the limits of the human empire. While the abuse of nature is increasing on a large scale, also the opposite is strengthened, especially in some neo-pagan movements or pantheistic movements who sacralize nature as if it were an untouchable taboo. Biocentrism considers the simple fact of living as the fundamental ethical criterion. Therefore, all the living creatures are at the same level and have the same value. Albert Schweitzer and Paul Taylor are some of the authors that eliminate any ontological and axiological difference between man and other human beings. Living beings. They claim that biosphere is a biotic unit of undifferentiated value and that all living beings have equal dignity. No one is superior than the other. Ecology is the one that denies in a more radical way any ontological and axiological difference between living creatures and proclaims Gaia, Earth, Gaia, the goddess of Earth. We need to overcome both extremes, both anthropocentrism, which is despotic, such as biocentrism. encyclical Laudato Si promotes that in nature, everything is related, and therefore it's not sufficient with a green environmentalism alien to social dynamics and human interaction. The Church invites us to embrace an integral concept of ecology and anthropology. In fact, the external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. In the Western culture, the relationship of man with nature has been normally interpreted from an anthropocentric ideology. With modernity, this tendency intensifies to the point of defending man's absolute dominion over nature and over his own body. A further accentuation occurs with the scienticism of the 19th century, which substitutes the ethical rationality by instrumental rationality, paving the way to the technocratic paradigm and the throwaway culture. The serious social and environmental crisis is a consequence of this essentialist concept that divides man inside and separates him from other living beings. We need an integral anthropology that does not despise the body and that overcomes those unhealthy dualisms that came to have, and this is in quoting Laudato Si, an important influence on some Christian thinkers throughout history. So, ontic dualism, the thesis postulates an ontic breakup between man and other creatures. That is, a radical separation between human beings and other forms of life, which would belong to another order of being. Consequently, the human being would not have any duty towards animals, nor would he recognize any rights to them. Nature would be pure, neutral matter without any intrinsic value, totally available to our own whim. Scheffer affirms that the thesis of human exception is supported not only by ontological and ontic dualism, but also in the exclusive human capacity to access epistemic or ethical knowledge, and to do so by means that are inaccessible to other creatures. The major forms of this theory are three. The first one, it's a philosophical one. Man is seen as an I or a subject, radically autonomous and founder of his own being. Therefore, his identity does not depend neither from biological or social life. Second, the social aspect. Human identity would be in the social, while its biological life would be only the substrate of humanity. Man would be unnatural or even anti-natural. Three, the cultural one, the properly human identity would be in culture as the creation of symbolic systems. This cultural transcended goes against nature and the social dimension. Ontic dualism is present already in ancient Greece that presents human beings putting order, cosmos, in chaos, in an always painful and conflicting relationship with natural forces and with his own body. A man is seen as essentially different to other animals. He has the logos, the word, the reason, while the rest of the species are irrational and their actions do not go higher than the uh, habits or instincts. His thesis is an ethical aspect. The law of nature must be respected, while in modernity, Man proclaims the owner and absolute lord of it. Furthermore, the physicist Greek includes it all, human beings and gods. It's circular, eternal, but it's not connected to the gratuity of a creative act. Centuries later, René Descartes accentuates the separation and states that the animal is a mere machine, that being made by God is incomparably better ordered and possesses more admirable movement than any form that men can invent. Following Cartesian epistemology, the movement of the Enlightenment at the end of the 17th century affirms that man is a unique being that can be defined as a thinker, right? Res cogitus, and therefore is clearly distinguished from the rest of the universe, res extensa, which would be subject to the laws of dynamics. The world would not be a communion of subjects, but just a bunch of objects described in mathematical and geometric terms. More specifically, it is defined as a clock, machine, workshop, experiment. To understand how it works, it would be enough to resort to the principles of matter and movement. The works of Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, among others, will reinforce this mechanical model of the world, which is observed and perceived in a functionalistic and utilitarian way. Animals also would be a kind of a machine without the ability to think and determined by biological mechanisms. Bergson claims that the thesis of human exception is the architrave of modern philosophy, at least from the Copernican revolution onwards. However, in the last decades, the social environmental crisis is forcing a change in this way of considering nature and relating yourself to it. Already in the year 2007, Shepard spoke about the end of human exception. Ontic dualism has also been manifested in disembodied spiritualism that avoids any personal involvement in the solution of social and ecological problems. It promotes conformism and resignation to the evils of the current valley of tears instead of stimulating personal and community commitment to overcome the structure's domination. It highlights the separation between matter and spirit and that hierarchical vision of reality. The material world would be an obstacle to overcome since it entertains and hinders our ascent towards God. More than coordinating, we speak about subordinating, subduing. The path to holiness demand contempt of the body, of sensuality in all material dimension. Ontological dualism. Ontological dualism clearly distinguishes between the body and the spiritual, rational dimension of man. The latter would be the most authentically human, and therefore the body must be subordinated to it. Thus, man is described through multiple oppositional pairs: body, soul, rationality, affectivity, need, freedom, nature, culture, instinct, morality, etc. Francis of Assisi had to face ontological dualism, which was very present in his time, for instance, among the Cathars. This heresy of the Manichaean and Gnostics despise everything visible and material, including the human body that would have been created by Satan, the evil God of the Old Testament. The soul belonged to another realm, that of the good God of the New Testament, and would not have nothing to do with the body, considered only as its prison. On the map, you have a representation of the extension of this movement. In the 17th century, Descartes clearly separates the rational soul and the body, as we have said. And the first resides the essence of man, characterized by the ability to think, res cogitus, while the body would be only an addition, and it is not substantially different from that of animals. Both dimensions of the human being are in contact through the pineal gland. The emphasis on either of these two elements will give rise to two opposing tendencies in understanding the human, idealism and materialism, but both are characterized by a strong dualism. Idealism focuses on rationality in subjective thinking, leaving the body dimension in the background. On the other hand, materialism reduces man to the material aspect of his body, as if it were one more piece of the cosmic gear. In fact, the anthropocentric affirmation of modernity and enlightened optimism coexists with reductionistic anthropologists that deny the spiritual dimension of man and declare him a necessary prisoner of his impulses and social conditionings. To understand man, it would be enough to directly observe his explicit behavior using the experimental stimulus response method, behaviorism. Aristotle had stated that some people are slave by nature, justifying in this way slavery and colonizing imperialism. Later on, we denied that the barbarians, barbers because they did not know how to speak, and the indigenous had a soul. The ontological dualism is still present today. Frequently, any manipulation of one's own body as if it were an object possessed by another is justified to the personal nucleus and therefore at the mercy of one's own whim. Aesthetic operation, diets, sex change, hormones, etc., are promoted as the best way of being oneself, to bringing out the most authentic self. The different forms of arbitrary domination over one's own body, in the words of Laudato Si, are transformed into a subtle logic of domination over creation and prevent an integral ecology. Ontological and ontic dualism have fed the logic of domination, the despotic anthropocentrism, and the culture of the throwaway culture. Often, even human rights have been reduced to mere defensive barriers to protect oneself from other human wolves, rather than being means to enhance our intrinsic capacity to give ourselves. The poor and abandoned, among whom is Sister Mother Earth, are the first to suffer the consequences of this divine and Promethean anthropocentrism, which exalts one's self-sufficiency and despises all that is perceived as fragile and defenseless. On a subjective level, this translates into an exacerbated consumerism that reduces everything to relevance, to simple products to use and throw away in a compulsive way. Both human beings excluded, and things become quickly garbage. We have thus arrived to the throwaway culture and an individualistic way of perceiving personal and community relationship. Also, work is reduced to a commodity, if no more value than the salary it provides. We highlight its Christian value and its relational dimensions of joyful encounter with nature and collaboration with the creative work of God is overlooked. Let's go to the third part of my presentation. We will study the basis for a new relational paradigm. Everything that exists has been created according to Laudato Si, according to the divine model, Trinitary model, and therefore is a web of relationships at all levels between ecosystems and between the various worlds of social reference. Creatures tend towards God, and in turn, it is proper of every living being to tend towards other things, so that throughout the universe, we can find any number of constant and secretly interwoven relationships. Everything is interconnected. And this invites us to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity, ignoring the natural ties that bind us to all creatures. Modern culture has accentuated separation and conflicting antagonism. Man has been defined as a wolf, being divided internally, ontological dualism, and clearly separated from other creatures, ontic dualism. Nature would be a battlefield. Well, only the strongest ones survive, Darwinism. This justifies despotic anthropocentrism, the logic of domination, and throwaway culture at all levels. For example, in economics, the war of interest is promoted, and it says business is business. Yeah, yeah. In politics, war is prepared with the excuse of guaranteeing peace. If you want peace, prepare war. In medicine, holistic treatments are avoided in order to promote the direct fight against pathogenic agents. And in the field of communications, we use lies and half-truth, fake news, as weapons to hurt and nullify the other. At a social cultural level, it tries to exclude any uncomfortable otherness. The elimination of the other would be a necessary pruning to ensure that the social tree is revitalized and grows. With respect to nature, priority has been given to the conquest and exploitation of resources, ignoring the capacity of welcome of the environment. Thus, the environment as a resource endangers the environment as home. Nature, cooperation is more important than conflict. Contradicting this conflicting vision, many scientific data show that in nature, cooperation prevails over struggle and that unity is superior to conflict. For example, Lynn Margulis, among others, questions the Darwinian thesis of on evolution and states that collaboration has been more decisive than the fight. Using his words, life did not colonize the world through combat, but through interconnection. The many forms of symbiosis and interdependence between different organisms are a good example of this collaboration that has made possible evolution. Within the human body, for example, the bacterial flora helps us digest and protects us from harmful microorganisms. There are also many cases of cooperative two-way interaction between different species, although some authors argue that one cannot speak of true communication among the species. The need for mysticism and spirituality. We need to develop a spirituality and a mysticism that opens our eyes in order to experience the intimate connection between God and all beings, and to be able to see nature as a joyful mystery of communion and relationships. This opening must also take place in the scientific and experimental field. In fact, Russell says, science in its beginnings was due to man who had love for the world. They perceived beauty, but step by step, the impulse power has dominated completely the impulse love. In this way, modernity has stripped the world of its mystery. We need a distinctive way that will help us to reject self-interested pragmatism because, and this is the word, it will not be possible to commit to great things only with doctrines without a mystic that encourages us. The mystic has this contemplative look that we need. In fact, mysticism and spirituality impulse, motivate, encourage, and give meaning to personal and communal action, appeal to the heart more than to the head, and offer motivations to nourish a passion for the protection of the world, thus rendering possible an harmonic and integral experience of reality. The mystic perceive interconnection and harmony of nature, not because the limited things of the world are really divine, but because he experiences the intimate connection that there is between God and all beings, and thus feels to be all things God. Francis of Assisi was a mystic and a pilgrim who lived in wonderful harmony with God, with others, with nature, and with himself. That is the four fundamental relationships of human beings. Contemplating creation, he praised the Creator. Growing in his union with Christ, he discovered himself a universal brother. Listen, Laudato Si, every time he looked at the sun, the moon, or the smallest animals, his reaction was to sing, incorporating into his praise all other creatures. And the current technocentric paradigm favors individualism, homogenization, and massification, but not individuality. Instead of welcoming and valuing, it prefers to analyze, objectivize, dissect. The other is not recognized or appreciated as a unique and unrepeatable you. Relationship of anonymous and efficient type, no-toism, not to recognize the other as a you based on monetary interests, are promoted. These are the relationships. In the Western philosophy, we highlight the uniqueness of the person, reducing him as a concreteness of the general. Says that after Scots, the individual disappears. In the Western philosophy, Scottish philosophy defends the dignity and the metaphysical freedom of the individual as unique and unrepeatable. Achatas is a word for saying this uniqueness, individuality. Encyclical Laudato Si is also underlines the importance of respecting the individuality of each person and each creature in order to promote unity and communion. Encyclical Laudato Si underlines also the importance of respecting individuality of each person in order to promote unity and communion. All living beings have a value of their own before God. Every creature has a function, and no one is superfluous. Also, the valuation of one's own body in its femininity or masculinity is necessary to recognize oneself in the encounter with the different. Franciscan spirituality and the encyclical Laudato Si poses the foundation of an anthropologic conception without dualism and opens the way to a more relational paradigm necessary to overcome these dualisms in order to take on an integral ecology with more simple lifestyles, just and fraternal. By so doing, we can restore fraternal communication without any exception in the common home. In fact, all the beings of the universe are united by invisible bonds. We depend one on the other, and no one is sufficient to himself. Ontological dualism makes no sense because all that we are has been loved by God and is therefore equally worthy. The incarnated Word does not redeem us from matter, but with matter and with the body. The Second Vatican Council affirms that man is corpore et anima unus, unity of body and soul. The use of the ablative case in the sentence set of the genitive underlies even more this anthropological unity. One must overcome not only ontological dualism, but also the ontic dualism, which makes a clear separation between man and other creatures. The encyclical Laudato Si recognizes that human beings possesses an inalienable value, a very special dignity, but it also recalls that the world has an intrinsic value in itself, independently of the utility that it can provide us. It is not mere nature, but a creation loved by God and therefore worthy. Man is imago Dei, and at the same time is a child of the earth, Adama, but a fertile land, a fertile humus. From this derives the word human and humility. Whoever becomes greedy and is despotic ceases to be himself. The human being shares with other living beings the same physical and chemical substrate and a good part of the genetic information. That is, he is closely united to all beings. Thus, we need to strengthen the awareness of a common origin, of a mutual belonging, and of a future shared by all. The links between all beings are so strong that man cannot take care of himself without taking care of nature, and vice versa. One cannot separate physical ecology from human ecology. That is, a feeling of intimacy cannot be real union with other beings of nature if in the same time in the heart there is no tenderness and compassion and concern for human beings. Growing in relational experience, if the spiritual experience is translated into practices as alms drinking and abstinence fasting that have as a goal purifying our hearts and our relationship. We therefore understand that less is more. We grow in simpleness and in ability to enjoy with little. Spirituality offers these values of and motivation so that with less one can live in a more authentic, a more fraternal, and a more satisfactory way. On the contrary, consumerism baffles the heart and prevents us from cherishing each thing and each moment. The universal brotherhood is a spiritual attitude that can be cultivated by dedicating some time to recover this serene harmony with creation, to reflect on our lifestyles and our ideals, to contemplate the Creator.
Contemplar al Creador.
If we feel intimately united to all that exists, the ecological virtues will spring out spontaneously. For example, charity, which is the main force of development; simplicity, which allows us to stop and appreciate what is small; humility, that makes it easier to go out of oneself to others; simpleness, the care. Conclusion. In this study, it has been shown that in order to recover the harmonious relationship with ourselves and with nature, we need to overcome the ontological and ontic dualism, since there is no ecology without an adequate anthropology. We've also highlighted the importance of spiritual experience, which is at the basis of Catholic environmental ethics, because this deep experience gives rise to great motivations for the care of nature and of our fragile brothers and sisters. The logical and rational discourse accompanies this experience, but it's not sufficient to nourish a passion for the care of the world. We need interior motives and a mystic that encourages us, because if the heart doesn't change, this volunteer effort is short-lived. Such special attention has been paid to Franciscan spirituality and to the encyclical Laudato Si, which affirms the common origin and destiny of all that exists. We are the fruit of the Trinitarian love and are naturally oriented towards loving communion in the house of the Father. Therefore, it is necessary to promote a holistic perspective which emphasizes the relationship and interdependence of all beings, including man. Franciscans stress that all creatures are part of a universal fraternity that has to be strengthened. This has highlighted the current pandemic. Coronavirus knows no boundaries, nor social classes, nor any type of limit or division that we might have created. Any foreigner that I find on the street is next to me, and that is essential for my own survival. To entering into relationship is not an option, but intrinsic requirement, need, both for us as well as for other creatures. The seriousness of the current social and environmental crisis demands the broadest collaboration in order to find integral and viable responses at all levels: cultural, religious, ecumenical, and ethical. Science and religion, which bring different approaches to reality, can enter into an intense and productive dialogue for both. We need to assume together a new ecological citizenship with more simple lifestyles and more sustainable ways of understanding the economy and progress. The change of mentality must begin in the family and continue in school, in the catechesis, and other educational settings. The ecological crisis is a family crisis, that is, a division at the global level of the relationship, the free paternal relationship that characterize family life. In order to overcome this crisis, we need to reestablish this type of relationship with mercy, for free relationship that we usually experience at home when we are young, or hopefully all, and that help us to discover the true face of our Father and the mystery of the us Trinitary. With the divine grace, we can strengthen our natural capacity for contemplation and relationship in order to be able to discover in all creatures God's loving face and our Trinitary mystery, A new beginning is always possible because God has definitely united himself to our land and his spirit is guiding us. So we open up the dialogue. There are two sisters who are collecting the questions in the chat. You can write them down on the chat so we can see if you might want to write something in the chat. As we were listening to Father Martin, something that has come out in this wonderful presentation.
Mientras tanto, padre, a mí
In the
me...
meantime, I do have a question with the Western philosophy. It gives the impression that these roots are very deep and it's going to be very difficult to try to overcome them due to the history behind it, right? Of the thought, of the strong influence of these thinkers that have marked strongly. This means that there's others or what other cultures, perhaps this different ones of this more harmonic lifestyle with nature, meaning more of a Eastern culture. When we address a topic, if we truly want to heal a wound, you need to clean the wound. It's not enough to just put a patch on it. Sometimes we say that we have goodwill, but we don't go in depths. We don't go to the roots. And this that I was suggesting to you, I've done, Levinas did this at the end of the Second World War. The Western world had thought that he had come to the peak, that Western culture was has a different orientation, and the Western philosophy was the Darwinian was at the peak that everyone had to turn to. At the end of the 19th century, there were many going up, the radio, the progress made. This was the Belle Epoque. It seemed that we were reaching excellence. And it was there that the Western culture, where first of all, First World War, Second World War, Holocaust, the worst catastrophe occurred. And so in this situation, Buber and Levinas say, what happened? Why did we come to this? Is everything was going so well? If everything seemed to be solved? And they said, we need to change Western philosophy. We have put in the beginning the dominating human beings. In a crisis such as this one, we must also ask ourselves, what went wrong? It's not just a matter of from now on, we're going to be good, we're going to behave. But if our mentality doesn't change, well, at the end of the day, we continue doing the same thing. And we as Christians, we acknowledge that fraternity and living in relationship, consoling one another is a gift. The first thing that we must change is this attitude in front of life. Franciscans founded a school called voluntarism. I don't want to, because I talk a lot about philosophy, start talking again about philosophy, we'll never finish, but we must find a way of graciousness, gratuity, that everything is a gift. Now, I remember once when I was studying, bringing students in England, and once they gave to me a poster of a tiger, and they said on the tiger, how can one be humble when he is as good as I, right? The tiger. We have focused too much on what we are. And we just say, who is a human being? Human being is irrational, and everyone is not rational, right? So we are better, we're high. And then some even say, since I am more rational, since I am intelligent, I am superior to others. I have to have privilege. I'm entitled to privilege. We need to change this mentality. If something you have, it is a gift. It's been given to you for free. If it's something is given to you, it's a gift again, and you have to share it because it's not for you specifically. We need to create this mentality. I said it at the beginning. Ask ourselves, what do you do? Instead of asking, who do you take care of? Who do you take care of? The question should be, right? We need to change. We change on this gratuity, and that taking care of the other, we take care of ourselves as well. So I don't know if there's somebody from Galicia. In Galicia, they say, well, he says, friends, yes, but you give me the what's worth of for the seeing that when you're talking business, we just don't, we're not friends. The mentality of the privileges, right, of conflicts, of struggles. We need to change this completely. As if we don't change this, everything else is nothing. Franciscans, they get this with voluntarism, and everything is to do something for free, gratuity. If you exist, it's not because you're better than the other. If you exist, it's because God has loved you. So if we talk about Descartes, we can change Descartes of Descartes. Instead of saying, I think, cogito ergo sum, I think because so I exist, it would say, I'm loved. That's why I exist. I'm loved. That's why God could have chosen thousands of different people from you, but he chose you. Not because you're better, because he decided to do so, because he loved you. All is a mystery of love. It's very, very difficult to understand. If we have this mystic experience, relationship are also going to be of gratuity. We're going to, but this is also a gift. This is something that you need to work on. It's not just something that you need to convince others. Well, in the encyclical Laudato Si, Pope says that those who are in charge of ecology and other issues, they are distance from reality on which they work on. I think that a way of to be more empathic, those internet most are the less empathic, right? A survey was done, you said, and this because they're in contact with a lot of reality. That's not the case. Why are Franciscans, definitely you yourselves, your mother Maria Rosa, why were they merciful? Why did they console? Because they had the experience of gratuity, the encounter of the face of the other, the naked face that awakens in me the ethical being. In order to reach this change, you need to get in touch with reality. The friars were the friars of the countryside. I mean, they lived with the people, and even the poorest one, and rigorous, so rigorous, they're not even the friars could bear him. He was there with the people, and he tried to help people. He was there next to them, to being in touch with people, with weakness, with a person, and knowing how to listen. This is awakens in you this ethical being. It's not a matter of ideas, especially it's a matter of experience. And for this, you need to strengthen empathy. Sometimes I ask my students when they travel and they try to go to places where people are suffering. No, I remember once, a long time ago, I don't know if there's somebody from Japan from here, but I was invited to Japan. We had a center there. And in Osaka, they took me to say the ones that were called nameless. Thousands of the people, the friars, were helping to feed them. They were nameless. They had in some way lived completely exploited. And I found this so strange. A country such as Japan and having all these people, nameless people, when I visited Brazil, they showed me experiences being in touch with people who are suffering. this changes your life. Francis of Assisi converted when he discovered the leper man, when he was able, when he gave me the grace, gave him the grace of welcoming him, and when he felt welcomed by him. Personal encounter is fundamental to awaken in us empathy, love. Russell used to say, science in the beginning was a matter, had to do with passion. Heraclitus and the other philosophers, they had the passion for the world because they had this passion. They tried to understand. But with time, we have turned the world in an object of observation. We have reduced it to, because we think that we are rational, to rationality, and that's it. No, we must go back to the ability, effective way. The Pope has convened this year the Global Pact for Education, and he stresses a lot on this, the Global Compact on Education. Education is not just an intellectual activity. The university must help people to enter, to get in touch with community, to feel connected with concrete reality, respond to the community. That is, has to increase their relational ability. The person who is educated must be the one who feels always more in tune with concrete reality and helps the reality. Without this, education is just a self-promotion. Yes, we are interconnected, but not in the same way. And not all annulling the differences. Sometimes in religious communities, we understand this in the wrong way. That is, someone comes, let's say, I'm going to tell you a friar, one of our friars who said, if you publish a book, don't tell it in the community because you're going to be have an enemy. You'll be envy will come out. And often in the communities, we talk about, oh, you have this flaw, this other one, but we don't praise the qualities. We don't talk about, why don't you talk about you have this charism, this quality, this gift? To be capable of feeling in relationship, valuing that the other might be better than me in something, but that's not a problem because he's my brother. And he's my brother. I am happy that he's better than me. I don't feel inferior to him. I'm happy. I'm flattered by what he has. And the same thing if I don't have anything. I don't feel if I have a quality, I don't feel I'm greater because it's a responsibility. The Pope stresses so much on unity in diversity. But this is how the Bible begins, the first chapter of the Genesis 6. God, out of what was a chaos, he creates a cosmos. First, he separates and he indicates the identity of each thing, the water, the stars, and then he creates the relationship. How beautiful would it be if we could all try to allow the other to develop all the quality he or she has. Often, we only think of what's material goods, and we forget that in the exchange that is so important are also the relational ones. Francis of Assisi, when he sends his friars to ask for alms, some were saying, oh, come on, I'm of a noble origin and I hate to beg. And he says, come on, why should I beg? You know what St. Francis said to him? Don't be ashamed, because you're not asking for the love of God. And what you're offering is much more than what the other is giving you. This is fraternity. And what a fact that I have or have not is not a problem, because the goods, relational goods, compensate the possible gap or difference that there is among the material goods. To feel brothers and sisters in a joyful way. Look what God has given you. Oh, how wonderful. Help me so that you have it. And I also visited, when I was in Peru, Lima, some educators were telling me, I went to school. I tried to do everything. I prepared the best program with Word. And then I arrived and I presented it. And the students tell me, oh, teacher, there's another better program than this that does things in a much better way. And I was like, oh, and I said, why? And I felt so badly. And he says, why? And he says, they know more about technology, but you have more experience in other things. Let them help you as far as technology is concerned, but you will help them in knowing how to manage well, the gifts that we have. If we were considered brothers and sisters, if we appreciate individuality, if we wouldn't be ashamed of not having, and including, we follow somebody who is a person who has been on the cross. Our crises are a possibility to come. Oh, this sin that has made us this. God can transform everything in an opportunity. So living in fraternity means to appreciate everything, not to not say, oh, God didn't know, I would have expected more. Definitely, you're going to have some other qualities, and this you can take advantage of this in order to be closer to somebody else in a different way. Well, ours is the logic of efficiency. Ours is the logic of love. If it were the logic of efficiency, we would be lost. And even so, we wouldn't have a lot of faith because we think that everything depends on us. And I say Jesus himself was the perfect communicators, progression, but they didn't understand him. To my students, I tell them he was the perfect communicator. Why? Why didn't they understand him? Doesn't seem that perfect. And to know that history is in the hands of God, but also in our hands, because he wants to count on us to do all that's possible and go to the end of the day and say, I give it to you. Since I started with Francis of Assisi, I can also say something else. Francis of Assisi wanted to be poor his entire life. He gave up his goods and he embraced poverty, the most radical poverty. However, at the end of his life, he realized that he did not let go of everything. You know what he had not let go of? Of the order. Of the order. The faithful were going in other ways. And he was desperate. He says, oh, the Lord has revealed to me. You are going where you shouldn't be going. And then he retreated to La Verna. He retreated in the book, the Wisdom of a Poor. He talks about this moment that he suffered so much, where he realized that he had taken as his possession the order. Like many fathers have their ownership of their sons and daughters, and they are desperate. Like we often are desperate because we want vocations and we are unable to achieve them, or because we want to be obeyed and they go some other way. And then when Francis realized that he was not poor, he said to God, I give you the order. It's yours. And I have done it all possible, and I give it back to you. And then he received. It was a crucifixion. It's not easy to be capable of not feeling at the center of the universe, of not the logic of efficiency. We have an encounter of young people. How many attended? And for efficiency, our logic is of love. The logic of love. Now it's up to you. Let's allow the Spirit to work. Well, sometimes consumerism reflects a bit of anxiety because we're not satisfied and we try to fill our life with things. What we are missing inside is not happy that has all that he wants, but he wants who's happy. for what he has. Less is more. Laudato Si stresses on this. To be capable of, like Saint Teresa, just God is enough. This experience of absolute gratuity, everything I have is a gift. This experience that leads us to feel grateful and not to try to project things of what we're missing inside. There's a book published in the 40s in English that is titled the New Gospel of Consumerism, the Good News of Consumerism. It comes to say, consume, consume, because so economy is going well. If you don't consume, things are not going to go well. This is a disaster. It's been a disaster. The Franciscans used to say, let richness circulate, to not stock up things. A professor in the United States used to tell her students, if you open your closet and you see something that you haven't been wearing it for a year, give it to the poor. It is no longer yours. This ability of feeling, of letting go, of knowing that we are just managers, and consumism is a weakness. Some authors say that the spiritual tendencies of pietism, once you lost transcendence, they went to consume the American dream. And Woody Allen used to say, money doesn't give you pleasure, but something quite similar to pleasure. This is having, finding it through things. Less is more. Yes, it's what the Pope has promoted in this Global Compact of Education. He's written an article on this that is being translated in different languages. That is, university must respond to its to the concrete community and respond to it. On the other hand, we need to have a concept of education that is not instruction. One thing is to instruct, another is to educate. Educate is to accompany the person in his or her process. What Paul Freire says, nobody educates anyone. We educate ourselves together, mediated by the world. And to educate, as Socrates, hermeneuticus, to help to be born, the person to articulate what is inside, but it's not sufficient. Some fathers and educators say, well, that's the knows a lot, so that they can take everything inside and then it's done. You have an experience, you are journeying, but apart from this, you have hermeneutical aspects to help them to find meaning to what they're living. Not only to articulate what they have inside, but to share in this that can be helpful, meiotic and hermeneutical. The university must go back to this meaning. This is the meaning of the relationship with the concrete reality, but not just the university, also the enterprises that in Brazil, for example, continues to have a lot of aspects is stressing on this. The enterprise must respond to the needs of community. At the end, we go back to the beginning. All is fruit of the Trinity. At the beginning of it all, before the existence of anything, we already had the relationship, communion among the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everything that has been created with forms in the Trinitary, and the seventh day, it will be for relationship. Not to be vague on this, but for relationship, because to work is to put at the service of others one's own gifts. In some conferences, I heard that the sin, the work is a consequence of the sin. How can it be a consequence? Our first fathers tell us that we're supposed to work. They cultivated to go back to this relational meaning, going back to the garden. The The sky sends us the rain, we work the land, and this gives us flowers. It's a garden. And we are not afraid, we are not ashamed. We are naked. This is a poetic way of they were well with themselves, and at the afternoon they walked around with God. What a wonderful description of what had to be the seventh day, a day without a beginning and an end, a day where we could be in communion without fears and to dream. The Pope wants to dream. He's inviting us to dream. The four dreams, Amazonia, to Fratelli Tutti, and the dreams. I mean, dreaming, to have hope. It's so important to have dreams, to dream. Helder Cámara said, blessed are those who dream, because they will give hope to many people. And even sometimes we will even have the satisfaction of seeing their dreams fulfilled. Let's continue dreaming and trusted that our life, our story, our society is in the hands of the Lord. And sometimes in religious life, as was preparing them, let's dream. Let's go back to the charism. Because, as the Pope says, this is a time of prophecy, of new rebirth.